to the Wednesday, September 16th edition of Three High Safeties. This is the fantasy football focused edition, and I'm joined by a couple of our fantasy football experts, Ian and Sosa. And the first thing I want to pose to you, Ian, is Wednesday is the biggest day probably for picking up guys on the waiver wire. Week 1 is going to have a lot of activity. There's going to be people maybe buying too high, maybe people who are not valuing enough. So who are you targeting? Who are your main waiver wire targets that people should be picking up in their fantasy leagues?
Yeah, one guy in just full point per reception leagues I think everyone should be targeting if you can get him is Nyheim Hines. And you know what? Might have, as a community, missed the boat on his potential. And we had Frank Reich in the offseason saying that 10-plus reception games were in his potential range of outcomes. But, you know, I think we always assumed there couldn't really be an Austin Eckler 2.0 here in Indy. It was just too easy. But, you know, after week 1, that's the case. I mean, the Colts had 17 targets, 2 RBs in week 1. No other team even had more than 12. And, you know, talking to Dwayne McFarland, fellow PFF analyst on the PFF Fantasy Football podcast yesterday, he brought up a good point where Jonathan Taylor's receptions, I mean, none of those were even on third down or in trailing situations. That was just when he was doing his normal early down work. So Nyheim Hines is cemented as the pass down back in an offense that loves to throw their running backs. Jonathan Taylor's going to be the main fantasy producer, but no reasons why a Phillip Rivers offense can't again enable 2 top 30 running backs more weeks than not.
Yeah, so I think, like Ian was saying, Hines is obviously a really popular pick for me too. I think he's going to be, playing that pass game role moving forward for the Colts. But to piggyback, I'm going to stick with the Colts too. And a guy that intrigues me is Paris Campbell, the slot receiver in Indianapolis. I didn't really know what to expect out of Campbell. Obviously, coming out of Ohio State, he was a bit of a gadget style player and didn't have really a true position coming out. But I think, even with his injury last season, again, we still didn't really know what to expect this season. Now, through week 1, I think we got a really good idea of, what he can be moving forward. And, Campbell playing 83% of the snaps was really intriguing to me. He had a team high 9 targets with, playing next to a guy like T.Y. Hilton is always impressive. And so, he pulled in 6 of those for 71 yards. I'm intrigued with how they used him. And I think, moving forward, he's a guy that, he could see a lot of volume in that slot role. And so I'm excited to see just how he works out with Phil Rivers at quarterback.
Yeah, that Colts offense has been great for fantasy production. Not so great for winning, Phillip Rivers, in these close games, but good for fantasy production. Well, I love both of those picks. Now, my guy is going to be Malcolm Brown. Now, the thing with Hines, I think if you need that solid floor in PPR, he's going to be your guy. Brown's the guy where you could get a pretty wide range of outcomes going forward. We don't know who's going to control that backfield. He had the more profitable role. He had the goal line work. He looked better if you want to use the eye test. We don't like to do that too much over here, but when you spend a second round pick on someone without an injury, you're probably not going to turn it over necessarily to Brown to have that upside role, but he at least has in some range of outcomes to be more of a workhorse there than someone like Hines. So that's why he would be a guy I would prioritize on waivers.
Yeah, and all 3 of these guys just had great week 1s. There's a reason why everyone now wants to put them on their squad. But we know there is the other side of the coin, which is players that had a disappointing start to the season. But hey, look, we just spent 7 months breaking down this whole year. It might not be time to jump off the train because of one bad week. Do you guys have any, prime post-week 1 trade targets? Kevin, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, my guy, I don't know why. We're always talking about Colts, I guess. It's just an all Colts show here. I'm going to talk about Jonathan Taylor. And the reason is, in the offseason, he was a guy where if you put him through a production-based model as a rookie, he was top-notch. If you put him through an athleticism model, running a 4.39 at over 220 pounds, he was top-notch. If he takes control a little bit more of that backfield, if you look at the Colts backfield, they had 45 expected fantasy points in that backfield, more than any other team, more than the Green Bay Packers, who were second. The Green Bay Packers scored 40-something points. The Colts scored 20 points. So that just shows you how much juice you can get out of the squeeze for just a little bit of scoring in that Colts backfield. And that's why I'm putting Taylor as a potential league winner. And that's the guy that I would still be buying high in some people's minds, but I think you could still get a value.
Yeah, I'm going to double down here, if you guys don't mind, at the receiver position. So 2 guys that really intrigued me, not even just based on their week 1 usage, but even coming into the year and kind of, confirming their usage in week 1 was Bears receiver Allen Robinson, who we don't exactly know what's going to happen, moving forward with him. There's a lot of extension talks, a lot of potential trade talks. So that does throw a bit of a wrench in the plans there. But he was able to pull down 5 receptions for 74 yards. And even in a struggling Bears offense, he proves every time that he's a guy who has a high floor. He can produce week in and week out, regardless of how his quarterbacks are playing. And he did have 3 red zone targets as well as 1 end zone target. And I think those high value touches are really useful. And then the other guy is Deshaun Jackson from Philly. Carson Wentz struggled in the first game. Really, the whole Philly offense did. But this is still a guy who might be one of the league's best vertical threats. And so I'm all in on these guys. I think Jackson's obviously going to be a lot cheaper than a guy like Robinson if you're not, inclined to pay so much to trade up to get an elite style receiver. But yeah, I think Jackson's, targets and usage rate from week 1, which, he had 6 targets, 4 of them were deep passes. I think it's really intriguing, and I'm willing to buy him moving forward.
Yeah, I like the D-Jax call. Only Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley had more air yards in week 1 despite that down performance. I'm sticking with the wide receiver group, specifically A.J. Brown. I saw the first half of that Titans game. I was pissed off. I've been touting A.J. Brown as a wide receiver 1 all offseason, but I also saw the second half, and that was really encouraging because they were forcing the ball to A.J. Brown anytime they could. I mean, we'd be talking about A.J. Brown being the hero after scoring a goal line fade if Tannehill had just put that ball a little bit more on the money. So, we knew he was going to be this boomer bust-esque receiver in a run-first offense this year. We've seen the booms. This was a bust, but the bust in 2020 still had 8 targets and, a decent enough. I believe it was around 4 catches, 40 yards. I mean, that's not great. We want higher performances, but if that's the floor, which it seems to be after that incredible rookie year he had where he broke the PFF database for yards after catch per reception, that's pretty good because, again, we knew there's going to be some sort of regression with A.J. Brown's efficiency, but if he's able to get 8+ targets per week, we will take that any day in fantasy land.
Yeah, so some of the, piggybacking off the receiver news, some of the biggest news that came out yesterday and, moving forward in the fantasy landscape is obviously the receiver or the injury to New Orleans Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas. So it sounds like he had a high ankle sprain, and originally it was believed that he was going to be able to play through the sprain, but now news came out that he's likely to miss a few weeks. What do you guys think of the receiver injury there? What do you guys project moving forward with the Saints? Ian, I'll kick it with you.
Yeah, so, I understand wanting to get, shares of Emmanuel Sanders, Traquan Smith, but I think the real big winner here might just be Jared Cook. And I understand he's not going to be a free agent in a lot of leagues, but really ever since Breeze has come back, he's shown great efficiency with them. Cook was one of these guys more in the tight end 1 borderline throughout the offseason because we had that concern about volume. Any offense with Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara at the top, you're going to have those concerns for the complementary options, but you take away Michael Thomas, and that's 11 targets, and Cook is the guy with the most experience in there. He's shown this connection with Breeze already. I mean, you've seen them actually go out of their way to kind of get him looks in the red zone, 5 catches for 80 yards in that week 1 spot, looks as healthy as ever. It's wild when you see these 30-plus-year-old tight ends continuing to do it, but Jared Cook continues to play at a high level in the year 2020. I think he's only going to get better without Michael Thomas, hogging all the targets.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Cook call, and I think he is a guy where if you're in a league where people have drafted multiple tight ends, they might think they're selling high on him. Maybe you took a shot on like a Irv Smith or an Austin Hooper or someone like that you'd want to bail on. I think he's a great target. Alvin Kamara is another guy where I think this solidifies his target floor, and he showed in week 1 what he can do, but it was really Kamara and Cook who were the 2 guys over 20% target share there. So I think that's big. And I'm also thinking if you have Michael Thomas on your roster right now, I think it's an interesting decision on what you could potentially do. Do you sell low on him? And I think there can be a case for that. Maybe someone who says, hey, I got a few good wide receivers. I can have, I can weather the storm through this and then I can win a championship. If you can get someone into that mentality, I think it could be a time to sell on Michael Thomas right now also.
Yeah, so like Ian, I would probably pick Jared Cook, but I'll play the other side, and I'll make the case for a veteran in Emmanuel Sanders. He's been with 4 or 5 teams in the NFL now throughout his career. Every stop he's proven to be a good player, and I think his route running chops, and I think even just how good of a player he is within that 5 to 15 yard range, I think that works very well with who Drew Brees wants to be as a quarterback at this point in his career. And I think with that being said, Emmanuel Sanders makes a lot of sense there. I think they're going to kick him into the slot relatively often. He can play outside. He can win short. He can win deep. He can win medium. There's really no limit to his game. And so I think even we've seen, some good usage for him in that second half. He ultimately totaled 5 targets. He caught 3 of them for only 15 yards, which, wasn't exciting, but he did manage to score a touchdown, and he nearly scored another where he had a catch on a crosser route and he kind of just tripped. But I think, just looking at how Drew Brees plays at this point in his career, where he likes to target players and, the route running chops of a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, I think their skill sets pair very well. And so I'll make the case for Sanders there.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.